chumbo on this one.
As he performs his laps, the cheers from the crowds get louder. They had all seen the boy before, but never had he been displaying such strength and endurance. Now, on his final lap, the cheers have now become roars of joys and admiration. The year is 1386 BC, and the boy is none other than Amenhotep III. And he had just completed his hectic marathon, a recoronation of sorts, where the pharaoh affirms his physical and mental fitness to rule by participating in the yearly sportive festival. This was one of the many occasions where the pharaoh would join the professional athletes and participate in the games, and Amenhotep III was particularly fond of this. So, who invented the sports that we know today? Where did the concept of Olympic Games come from? How old exactly are hockey, fencing, and gymnastics? If you like this type of long-format content, leave a comment. It is often wrongly assumed that the Greeks invented the concept of the Olympic Games, along with the sports that were enjoyed during these events. We now know that Africans in Kemet, all the way back in the 3rd millennium BC, were already enjoying the majority of these sports. Egyptologist Toby Wilkinson notes that energetic and physical pursuits played a particularly important part in the education of future leaders. Running, jumping, swimming, rowing, and wrestling were all part of the weekly routine, designed to develop strength, stamina, and team spirit. Dr. Douglas Brewer and Emily Teeter state in their book, Sports and Society in Ancient Egypt, that the ancient Egyptians had a great respect for rules and fair play. Referees were appointed to ensure that the competitions were conducted fairly, and penalties were imposed on those who broke the rules. The winners of the competitions were honored and celebrated, while the losers were respected for their efforts. Crowd support was also an important part of ancient Egyptian sports. Spectators would cheer for their favorite athletes and teams, and this helped to create a festive and supportive atmosphere. Overall, sports were an important part of ancient Egyptian society, and they helped to promote physical fitness, fair play, and social cohesion. Winning athletes were celebrated as heroes, and it was a propaganda opportunity to represent one's hometown. The winners were celebrated and honored with feasts and gifts, while the losers were respected for their efforts and received consolation prizes. The ancient Egyptians also had a tradition of holding elaborate ceremonies to mark the end of the sports competitions. The athletes would be paraded through the streets, and a grand banquet would be held in their honor. This helped to create a sense of community and solidarity among the participants and spectators alike. The other major sporting event in Kemet was the Heb Sed festival. This happened on the 30th year of the pharaoh's rule and every 3 years after that. This was a massive celebration that drew in the whole kingdom and notable athletes from neighboring kingdoms, specifically Nubia, with whom they shared a virtually identical cultural and ethnic identity. The sports held during the Heb Sed festival were an essential part of the event, demonstrating the pharaoh's vitality and reinforcing his divine status. Among the most significant competitions were the ritual race and the bull hunt. The ritual race, known as the Race of the Heb Sed, was a strenuous test of the pharaoh's physical prowess. In this event, the pharaoh ran a course marked by boundary stones, with his route carefully chosen to encompass the 4 cardinal directions, representing the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. The race symbolized the pharaoh's capacity to maintain order and stability in the kingdom. As described in the Book of the Sed Festival, an ancient text detailing the event. And so he runs, our great pharaoh, swift as the wind, embodying the might of Horus and the wisdom of Thoth, uniting the 2 lands and keeping Maat in balance. The bull hunt was another crucial sport during the Jubilee Festival. Here, the pharaoh showcased his strength and mastery over the natural world by hunting and capturing a wild bull. a powerful symbol of virility and fertility. The tomb of Kajemni, a high-ranking official during the 6th dynasty, features a vivid depiction of the bull hunt. With a spear in hand and courage in heart, the pharaoh pursues the great beast, displaying his mastery over chaos and his divine ability to protect his people. Toby Wilkinson attests that Amenhotep II, in 1400 BCE, was an excellent archer who, quote, was apparently able to shoot an arrow through a solid copper target while mounted in a chariot, end quote. Ramesses II, on the other hand, was also known as a skilled archer and hunter who kept himself physically fit throughout his very long life. Throughout the history of Kemetic civilization, sports and fitness played an important role. So much so, in fact, the Kemetu single-handedly invented the majority of the sports we enjoy today. In his paper on the Egyptian origins of Olympic Games, Dr. El Gamal states that, quote, fully aware of the invaluable role of sport in raising the standard of health and hence of national productivity, the ancient Egyptians as a whole, men, women, youths, and children, were all engaged in sporting activities with a zeal which amounted to a cult, end quote. These sports were played by everyday Egyptians with pretty much the same rules they are played today. Rowing competitions, water jousting, competitive races, playing handball, and high jumping competitions. Variants of handball also existed, with balls made of papyrus in its core with an outside of cloth or animal hide. The oldest mural of sports can be found on Zoser the Great, the founder of the 3rd dynasty. That same dynasty that is popular for building the Great Pyramids that we know today. All kings and queens of Kemet paid particular attention to their body image. This translated to the image they portrayed of themselves on statues and murals, but they tried to remain active and project an image of fitness. One of the only queen pharaoh, Queen Hatshepsut of the 18th dynasty, also had herself depicted as participating in the Heb Sed festival. This festival where the pharaoh is required to show proof of fitness. It is interesting to see that Queen Hatshepsut did not escape nor avoid this manly tradition, even as a female ruler. In fact, pretty much all rulers of the Nubio-Kemetic civilization complex depicted themselves as participating in the Heb Sed. This shows that sports and the fitness of the king was important, not only for the commoners, but even more for rulers. All the way back in the Old Kingdom, Kemetu started holding an early version of the Olympic Games. These included hockey, handball, gymnastics, javelin, equestrian sports, high jump, swimming, weightlifting, rowing and boating competitions, archery, marathon, tug-of-war, fishing, and possibly fencing as a form of stick fighting, and many others. But by far the most favorite of games were wrestling and boxing. It is these practices that the Greeks, in their own admission, inherited. And not just the Greeks, but the Phoenicians and ultimately the Romans. Greece, throughout the centuries, continued to be influenced by Kemet in many ways. From their architecture to their sciences, the Greeks were indebted to those who gave them the gift of civilization many times over, through their multiple rise and civilization collapse. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote of the significant impact Egypt had on Greece, stating, almost all the names of the gods came into Greece from Egypt. Herodotus, Histories 2. This cultural download extended to sports and athletic competitions as well. It is believed that the ancient Greeks adopted pretty much all of the Egyptian sports and athletic practices, along with their rules. Even the Kemetic sportive festival eventually led to the establishment of its Greek equivalent in 776 BCE that they named the Olympic Games. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, in his Library of History, specifically attributes the origin of athletic games to Egypt. The Egyptians were the first to institute games and contests of strength and swiftness, ordaining prizes for the victors in the several competitions. Diodorus Siculus, IR 18.2. When Kemet fell in 300 BC after 3,000 years of civilization, the inhabitants migrated back to their homeland, south and southwest. Many times before in the past it had worked, they had gone south to regroup amongst their people and come back stronger. This time, though, they couldn't. They went in search of another El Dorado, another Nile Valley. They took with them their favorite gods and their favorite sports. In Senegal, for example, where you find the closest language to ancient Egyptian, both in vocabulary and grammar, we also find a very strong culture of traditional rowing and wrestling, just as it was practiced in Kemet. They call their wrestling la'am. Some variations even allow for blows, and it's not just Senegal. You will find traditional wrestling in very similar forms with the Nigerian kokawa, the Niger's tuku, the Sudanese nuba, the Ethiopian tegel, the Mauritanian lebzel, the Guinea boar, the Congo and Mali luta traditionnelle. In fact, it is present in some form or another in all black African countries north of the source of the Nile, tracing perfectly the origin and exodus of the Kemetu people. So next time you see athletes playing ball, hockey, running, wrestling, doing gymnastics, fishing, boxing, swimming, jockeying, playing handball, rowing, doing archery, remember that it was the Africans from the Nubio-Kemetic civilization complex that first created and popularized these games and their rules. Support Without History with any of the links in the video or in the description. Join us and see how those who are said to be without history birthed civilization itself.